start. Our next session, as you know, is by our keynote speaker. I don't mean to take all the limelight again and again, but the reason I'm here again is just to introduce him, because my next book is going to be on him. So I think it's prudent that I introduce him. That will be my second book. He's here. As you can see, he's one of the dynamic persons in Himalayan state of northern India called Uttarakhand, where he not only does all kinds of marches and movements to challenge the status quo, to challenge the governments, their local governments, central and state. He himself, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, he was a botanist in his past life, but then he renounced his teaching and research career, and he full-time became this driving force to motivate and mobilize, literally mobilize thousands and thousands of people across northern India and even entire India. He has done several marches across India, east, west, north, south, and you'll hear more from his energy. So, welcome, Dr. Joshi.
Thank you very much, Pankaj.
Yes.
At the outset, I just would like to thank the whole team of UNT, Dr. Josh, Pankaj, Alicia, and Kate Brown, and many, many others, whom 2-3 years ago we had been discussing that unfortunately we have international summits happening, some political summits, sometimes economic summits, and different kind of summits. But there has never been a rural summit. And when we discussed with Dr. George, who happened to be often in India, we had been interacting that there has to be a summit of rural leaders. How do they think about the rural globes, the people in the globe who lives in the rural part of the world? And these people ultimately are most important. Unfortunately, they are not acknowledged for their contribution. And since me and many others have been working in rural India for the last 30-35 years, various issues important we are working on. And so was that whenever we had a chance to travel some other developing countries, underdeveloped countries, we did find there is a striking disparity between the two. So, since I always appreciate Dr. George and the Pankaj, both of them, especially George for the reason that he knows, in spite of being an American and Canadian exposure and everything, but he knows rural India more than any one of us. Because he traveled extensively, and that gave me idea he's the most vulnerable person I can catch hold of. I told him that, George, don't you think that there is a disparity, urban and rural? We do not deny we are brothers, both urban and rural. But the issue of the urbans, unfortunately, are never raised. They do not become an issue for any country. Take my country, for example. We have 650,000 villages, and hardly we have 8,000 cities, 22,000 sub-cities. But the 650,000 villages are never, unfortunately, get a place which their counterparts, the cities that they get. And that was one issue. Unfortunately, God bless me that I was the one, and some of my colleagues too, traveled the whole country by cycle 2-3 times, just to know where the India stand and the rural. Ravi pointed out something. There is a Hindustan, India, Bharat, and there is an India. So well, we saw it very closely, and that was one reason I have been to Lanka, I have been to Bangladesh, I have been to some other places, and then since we were all different leaders in different places were working for the rural community, it was all time coming into the mind that, you see, we have political leaders meeting in Paris, America, and other economists are meeting, discussing issues on the global economy going where and what. But there has never been any summit, any discussion where the leaders of rural can come to speak underprivileged of this globe. So I'm really grateful that the whole idea, today we are all here, the number doesn't matter to me. What is more matters that at least we have begun with something which is very rural and specific. And it is unlike others. We definitely, I believe, that will come up in 2 days of our discussion in this workshop, where what should be done to acknowledge the contribution of rural people in the globe at par with the urbans. So when this was happening, Dr. Josh took a lot of interest and a pain. He has spoken that he had literally to beg people to support. Grateful for UNT, who came forward, also International Unity, the UNT, to help the one. See, maybe I'm sorry, I'll take in advance, I'll say, you may forgive me for some of the critics, some of the harsh things comes out of in my presentation. But the truth, I would love to speak a truth. And that maybe might be some help for us to take something tomorrow at the end of the workshop, which can be a future roadmap where all such leaders who hails from different rural communities are together at this place. Now to me, and many of us, sustainability. Now let me tell you, officially this word came sometime Rio 17, in 1917 decades, 70 decades, where Rio and Stockholm discussed sustainable development. And ever since, every conference, every meeting, this word comes without any sustainability ever I have seen in any part of the world. But this word is being used often, sustainability. Let me tell you, what is this sustainability that Rio and this Stockholm talked about was, they realized at point of time in 70s, there is something wrong happening. We are taking away a lot of natural resources, and the development has been set to consume the natural resources. There has to be a sustainable development approach in our plan and the policies. And many countries participated in the one. But unfortunately, I know that in my country too, many projects then after came saying sustainable development, sustainable water, sustainable, so much sustainability came. I do not know where it stands now, but it became a kind of a slogan in any workshop, any conference, sustainability. And honestly speaking, there is nothing by this name today we have in the society and in the resources. So it is 44 years now of that sustainable word, the Rio and the Stockholm talked about. But to me, the one who represent the rurals and also define in other places sustainability. How can I use it? How can I do that? Can I proceed here? Well, it is subsistence. We work hard for our subsistence, and when it becomes surplus, it can only become sustainable. Because if you are not subsistence and you cannot produce surplus, you cannot become sustainable. And it's the story of most of the rural part of the world. They struggle hard for their subsistence. And the surplus today, if any given country claim today, they are surplus by food. No. They must have lost something in the quality as well as in the quantity in other parts. So unless we both by quality and quantity are surplus, we cannot be called sustainable. And also consumers and contributors, We have large number of consumer, but contributors are few. There has to be a balance. There has to be something so that we really can call sustainability exist in us, within our systems. Now, why rural sustainability? Ultimately, George and other colleagues have named this workshop a rural sustainability. The truth is, it is the only source of local to global primary needs. When I say primary need, food, water, soil, and based on that what is being generated as electricity and any other things. They are primary source, primary needs. They come from the rural sustainability. And so, if there is any rural sustainability, that does mean it's a global tool. And the one which is very important issue, it is a rural people only where we have economic and ecological balance. We are not consumers only, we are contributor also. So there is an ecological and economical balance that exists in rural areas. They produce, they consume, they maintain, and they do everything. There is an economic and ecological balance that always be there. And if an urban is to survive, they cannot survive without a food, water, and there are all resources that comes from the rural part of the world. And more important, why rural sustainability? It is the only kind of sustainability which is cultural inclusive. We do not merely take technology science as a tool to develop. It has intact with the culture. For example, I am talking spatially. The Asian part of the world, we have, for example, agriculture. It's truly an agri and culture. Otherwise, it has become agri-commerce. We are cultural and inclusive in our approach. Rural sustainability, therefore, is the one which is not merely a sustainability that we have for the rural people, but the rest of the world. And the whole global sustainability depends on the rural, because most of the primary needs, it comes from the rural part here. Now, let me take you back. A true sustainability kind of issue, which Rio people or the Stockholm discuss about was, what is a sustainability? Where we have economic and ecological balance. And it used to happen in a village long back. A village had a water, its a resource. A forest, its a resource. And water, air, soil, the forests around, and there was an interdependence strategy within the village only. There used to be human skill, carpenter, blacksmith, barber, and whatever you can think, and that there had been a dependence between the resources, natural and human resource. The ecology and economy were truly balanced. And there exists a sustainability. There was no break. And beside two villages, if one village produced X produce and the Y in another villages, they had an exchange. And both of them, for their primary needs or other needs, were dependent on each other. But essential feature was there was economic as well as ecological balance, which currently we do not have. And so is the story of climate change, global warming. What is it all about? It is just because we have broken. Now what happened in a course of time? Now the new word came, development. The development came, the word came, which was splitting in nature. It took the whole environment and economy, which became the urban feature more, the economy, industrialization, infrastructure, and whatnot, and the environment, production, agriculture became the responsibility. It became the rural specific. But we shouldn't forget that. The rural gave the survival and existence. It was not, if you live in a air-conditioned house and a BMW car running, you need food to eat and water to drink. And it comes from the villages. They are having the forest, conserving the water, making the river, glaciers, they are all around rural part of the world. Therefore, the development strategy that set a path where ecology and environment and economy became in the two directions. The rural became the producer, and of course, what rural had been producing, there was no choice. And the equity came from the rural only. Because whatever air that forest produces around the rural part, definitely shared, that air is shared by everyone. And it is always inclusive. It includes the urban also when they think of this so-called any progress they are making. And also, unfortunately, it's a deserting and the economy, urban feature, which is more. It is towards a luxury, facilities, managerial, and it is optional. You want, you don't want, it's fine. But you cannot live without water, food, and soil. And at the same time, equity is the feature of the rural. Whatever we produce, we share with everyone. A farmer producing a food does not mean he only eats it. It shares it with everyone. But an industrialist sitting in the urban does not share much with the others, as a rural have been doing. And they are partial. Rural is inclusive and urban development is the isolated, and there is a constant growth in urban. At the same time, the rural part of the globe, case the Asian countries, many other countries, of course, the African countries, there is a degeneration set in the rural part. Now, rural are aiming at the primary needs. You see, as I said, you see the water, forest, everything comes from the rural part of the world, and urban aiming at education, management, infrastructure, industry, market kind of skills that is there. But we shouldn't forget, unfortunately, everything now, the natural resources, the nature what has given us is commercialized now. Look at the water. It is totally commercialized now. The bottle that we have been drinking, the waterway, we never thought the water will be sold 30 years ago. Never thought the water will be sold in a bottle. Now it is totally commercialized. And the commercialization comes from the urban. The producer do not have access to that kind of returns, the economic returns from the water they produce. Take my case. In India, if you travel in a flight, you will find an Himalayan water bottles being sold. And that water belongs to the Himalayas, but sold by one of the industrialists sitting in the urban. Resource produced by the rural and the management and the managerial, and the larger profit goes to the urban. And so is the case of soil. And the soil is totally commercialized. Today what we eat is a chemical, and it's a chemical fertilizer has taken a place. Insecticide, pesticide, full way. And so the air quality, United Nations latest report unfortunately say that I come from a country where 20 cities are worst polluted, and so is the case of China, which is growing economic power. The quality of air has gone down. If today you have a water bottle here you are sitting with, tomorrow 10 years after, maybe that you will have an oxygen box with you, inhaling the oxygen beside the water you drink. Because everything, the urban way of management and the commercialization is not at all good, and what urban has produced has not much percolated, gone into the villages, and is the reason why there is a resentment now coming up, and also underprivileged community are shouting in a different way today. Now, as a role on resources, if the resource, X resource, natural resource or any generated resource, rural, unfortunately, if you look into the whole global development strategy, the rural are never acknowledged the contribution they have been making. Where development credit always go to the urbans. That country has New York, you have California, and India has a New Delhi, Mumbai. You see, these are the names whomsoever travel from one place to another. They never take a name of a village, group of villages who give us a food. We never acknowledge the development progress credit to the rurals. And if there are no rurals, I don't think urban will survive not more than a 2-3 months, because the survival is only possible with the food, the water and the air. If you don't have the one, I don't think any level of urbanization will not help. And it is happening now. My country and many other countries are facing now the disasters, and ultimately this disaster causes the kind of way we have our development plan, so much of energy release, so much use of the natural resources. Ultimately, the nature does not forgive you. It will never forgive us. And that is the reason it is unfortunate is coming up. And the rural are producer, urban are manager. You see, what brand of flour is sold, the potato chips, anything which is being sold, it is urban made, and where the farmer produce it. So farmer have merely been a producer and urban have become a manager. We do not deny that share of the urban to do the management, but the very important is that there has to be a right profit sharing mechanism. If we don't do that, what is likely to happen that the migration, as I said, is almost done in my state. 3,000 villages almost have been emptied. People have migrated. There is no job opportunity there locally. Because what they produce, others take more advantage. The middleman become the real hero of that resource. And they control everything. And rural are contributor and urbans are more consumer. That's the kind of relation today that we have. And we are resource savior. And as I said, its users are the urban, and ultimately we are sufferer. And urbans are merely the spectator. Just watch what is happening. Might be the reports come in the newspaper, what has happened in that village, what scarcity, if no amenities are there, and sometimes the disaster unfortunately come in the rural part. Take example of Himalayas. You must have heard 2013 when disaster hit us. Uttarakhand I'm coming from. These Uttarakhand people are saving forest. They are saving rivers. But ultimately disaster, they became the sufferer. The savior became the sufferer. And well, if this is going to happen often, so the people will not save resources for all of us. So the issue is that becomes urban responsibility more, in my opinion, to ensure the rural acknowledgement, the rural inclination towards. Because unless they do it, this is going to be the survival issue for urbans more in future. This is a flow between the urban and rural. Urban, from the rural there is a migration, innovations also done locally, wisdoms are there, go to the urban. What the urban are doing, the waste and the pollution are major contribution of the urban people in the society. They have been doing health services, knowledge, innovations, market, but ultimately, as I'm to say that, this is not going to go for a long now. And therefore, those who are here also must be very much responsible. Besides, apart the kind of case study they would like to share with all of us. We have a common responsibility which has never happened. And that's why I always say, I'll be thinking that, of course, the kind of summit, kind of gathering Dr. George and his team and Pankaj have done is a history of its kind. That a meeting in America, we really wanted in America, this meeting, because of two major reasons. The reason number one was America. America is America. People here in America are thinking of a rural, if we at least initiate a discussion, dialogue, something in America does mean a lot, because everything unfortunately goes from developed countries to developing countries and underdeveloped. Otherwise, nobody is going to listen, because when I was coming to this place, I said rural discussion is, rural kind of a gathering is happening in America. Half of the people watched me, gazed at me. What do you mean with that? In America, what rural? I said they are the biggest consumer in the world. There should be a rural summit so that they realize that the rural contribution is what? Acknowledge their acknowledgement, because the people who are coming from different parts of the world. So, look at, if any given land use in the globe, we have urban infrastructure, building, transport, industry, whereas in rural part of the world, it is totally devoted to agriculture, horticulture for everyone, forests for everyone, water bodies, river, glaciers, everything. It comes from the rural. And community settlement may be the part of land use we have in the villages settled in the rural part. But look at the urban contributions and the rural contribution on land use is more for everyone. Because the kind of development that urban have set, the policy maker have begun. Because unfortunately, see, the most of the policies, they are never and never. The local rural were involved in making a policy of the country. It is the urban decide what should be the policy for the country. So take an example, agricultural land. I am to tell you that globally, agricultural land is shrinking. And that means the food that we have, maybe that we are surplus, but the surplus in food we may have, but the quality and quantity have gone. How much organic new word has come up? Because, well, again, opportunists have realized that this is one avenue of new market where they say the organic food coming on, but the truth is that, of course, if productivity have gone up, it is because of aggressive agriculture we are doing. It's an agri-commerce more. Lot of fertilizer we have been using, chemical, pesticide, and so on. But ultimately, the land has gone down across the world. And that does mean the rural people aversion for doing agriculture which does not have a good economic return to them. So they do not want, say case of India. In India, 92, this was the household land holding, it has come down to 0.592 in 2013. Because 40% people in India have left farming. Well, India today is of course surplus or to feed its people, but two things happened. Number one, it became a more commercial farming. A group of people have been producing a lot. We have 80% marginal small farmers producing of course 50% of the total production. But by and large, the small landholders have begun to leave farming and selling it to the commercial farmer. Well, that brings the total surplus in food. But at the same time, the quality and the diversity of food have gone lost in India too. And so is the case everywhere in the world. So if we are happy that we are surplus by food, but quality is really a question that we are still with that. And so is the case of forest area. The forests are very important, ecologically very important. And if climate change and climate issues, carbon emission is somewhere sinking point is there, it is the forest cover that we have. But slowly I am to tell you that the forest cover mentioned, the quality of forest also has stooped down. Take example that in my place, that the quality of forest has become broad leaves to cheer pine, one of the kind of a tree which does not have any ecological environmental contribution. It does not make any soil. It is a shallow root system. 70% land is at a cheer pine. Because the quality of forest, maybe the cover is the one, but the quality of forest have gone down. And ultimately, the broad leaf trees have a role to conserve the soil, water, and so on. They can only combat with the climate change kind of issue. And say the energy issues. Who consume more energy? Well-known facts. The energy, urban, and it is produced by the resources, they are governed, they exist in villages. Take an example. Most of the power dams, hydro dams, are coming in the rural areas. In my place only, Uttarakhand, Arunachal Pradesh is another state. We have more than 500 dams of different size are coming in the Ganges. And it has totally spoiled the whole river. And who needs this electricity? New Delhi. And so is the case of Himachal Pradesh too. There are a large number of dams coming, and they ultimately are spoiling the local ecology and ecosystem. So, energy for whom? Where it is sustainable. If we have electricity supply like in this room and in a building 24 hours, at what cost, on whose cost? That time has come. We should realize that if you really want to sustain, you will have to think today. And the only answer comes because 2 billion people do not have the electricity in the world. And we here have 24 into 7 into 30 and 365. Everything is going on. But since we are not sufferer, we do not realize. Those who are suffering, they know what it is all happening. We are happy with. And since policy issues, discussion issues, media, everything in the urban, so they do not realize what is happening in the rural part of the world. So it is never a mainstream news of all those channel, print, what is happening, where we stand today in primary productivity for another 2050 to come. So, as I said, the power, the energy is produced on the resources, the coal, the water, everything comes from the rural resources, but unfortunately 2 billion people of the rural part of the world do not have electricity. So we are definitely biased. And so the politics, which ultimately, who make, in my country, the Prime Minister of India is elected out of the vote majority in the rural part. And he became a Prime Minister, but the second day he forgets about it. We have 650,000 villages, they definitely are voters, but merely voter. It is the urban because most of the governance and the political power are around the urbans. So the decisions are always towards, and if they really think of villages, you know what they think? Urban village. Again the urban culture, they think to develop a village. The village does mean a culture, its resources, its values. But again the urbans have a plan for development of a village with the style that they live with, that is the urban village kind of a concepts are taking place. And as I said, rural do not have any political say, they are merely a voter. Governance, of course, in the urban. Rural do not have any role on that. Policy decision, no say for the rural, everything happens in the urban areas. What should happen to that part of the country? What should happen to this and that? It is the urban take a decision. So the rural, who in spite of the fact are largest number of voters in the world, but they do not have kind of a say unless they become a movement against a particular government. But honestly, there is no system which may decide that the urban say should equally be in the governance, in the system, because they are the larger number. Now ultimately, the impact of urbanizations, whatever happened, because the new generation do not find, they are not very happy in the rural part. Even in the Switzerland, they never want to be in countryside, they want to be in Zurich. And so may be the case in America. So it is happening that the trend is the overuse of energy and resources, environmental stresses, socio-economic imbalances, socio-cultural, the strain has come, migration from rural to urban, lowering primary productivity, poor natural resource management, and ecological and economic imbalances. See, everybody is very serious about in Paris last year, there had been a meeting. All political heads had been discussing that what is happening. In fact, they have been raising issues of environment and ecology, but in fact it was a fight for economic fight in ecological disguise. Issue was environment, but India wanted its share of development. China never wanted to go back. America say, no, you should not use much of your resources. Carbon emission will be intense, so stop it. So, it is something happened, economic fight in ecological disguise. But honestly, we are not very much serious, honest about the future of the globe. And so is the case in 1995, maybe it is globally, the world population in the rural was 3 and it has become 2 now, and 2015 it is almost equal. So ultimately it is affecting somewhere our primary productivity. Well, this is one word, gross domestic product, disaster, gross disaster. See, we as a rural do not acknowledge any such growth indicator because we are not present in so-called gross domestic product except agriculture, which has stooped down in the beginning when GDP was calculated. In my country it was 40% contribution, it has come down to 13, hardly 2-3% is the rate of growth. Industry took over, infrastructure services taken over. The GDP rural contribution was merely for agriculture, it was decided. Rest of the things came there in the part of, and that is the reason the millionaires, the billionaires, they contribute to the total GDP. The poor people of rural part who work for all of us are never being seen as a contribution in the gross domestic product. And you see, regional disparities in GDP per capita. You see, GDP per capita tends to be higher in urban region than in rural and intermediate ones. And in 2003, GDP per capita, OECD said 51% higher than the rurals in urban areas. So why? Because we fight in our country, my state, because that is one place where we work. I said we do not approve this gross domestic product for the growth measure of this state. We were granted statehood 15 years ago. But unfortunately, all villages in rural India, the rural parts of my state, were totally ignored so-called progress and development. Industries came and the GDP became very high. It was 2% and it became 11% after 15 years. And when we analyzed, it was just because a number of industries came because they were exempted from the tax by the state. So the GDP does not at all represent. And when we ask government to separate both GDP from the rural and the urban, here one rich man earns thousands of the million of rupees, and his per capita income, his income is added to the poorest man on the far end of my village. And when that come average, he is also seem to be very rich and happy. So this kind of GDP, which is of course, we disagree absolutely, because it does not reflect the economy of any given state, per capita income of any state. It has to be that rural must be different than the urban. Then only the government may realize that where the rural stands in their contributions. And I again say, why should we take this GDP as a growth measure? Merely when the European came after the Second World War, and they set industrialization as the main course of their development. Then the GDP came as a measure and it imposed everywhere, everybody accepted it. But at the same time, this GDP does not reflect the rural contributions in the total development. And there is a large gap. And in case Congo, hardly 348 per capita income, and we have not separated it. So this is, if we stand in the world, how many countries are developed? They are developing countries or underdeveloped countries. That means more and more rural in the globe than as compared to the urban. So we said, to the state, because we are an ecological state, we are Himalayas. So we say we were given the statehood, not because merely we are poor as compared to the rest part of the country, but we are ecologically very vulnerable. So therefore our growth measure should not merely be a gross domestic product, which does not say much. We really need another growth measure which serve all. A GDP serve handful of people in the world. Whereas we say that forest, what is the growth of forest? What did government do this year to increase the area under the forest by quality and quantity? What amount of water we were able to conserve? Because the river in India, 263 rivers are drying in our country. Most of the ponds are dried up. That ultimate natural resource, I have never been part of the gross domestic product. If we deduct GDP with the natural losses that we have, we'll go to the minus. But it is never accounted. So what we simply said to our state government, we disagree with your GDP because it doesn't mean much with the rural part. Rural survive because in the rural India there is an inclusive model of growth. That means we need a forest, we need animal husbandry. It's an inclusive model of growth where every natural resources is a part of our progress and development. So we need a different growth measure where we have tell us what is the water you have able to conserve, the rainfall that we were able to harvest, what is the quality of air that we improve, the soil that we improve, give a separate measure. Because in my state, 20% people live in the urban areas, 80% in rural, whose survival are water, they do agriculture, the survival with the forest, and the soil, they can make a organic kind of food. We said we need another growth measure, where we can compare, where you go for GDP and we need a gross environment product. And moreover, you see the GDP serve urban, it's a luxury values, infrastructure, services, whatever, and social impact of so-called GDP is economic disparity, and services is hardly in my country 35% people are served, whereas the gross environment, the forest, water, soil, 100% people, they enjoy the gross environment product. The economic growth it is shared by merely few people, but the ecological, environmental growth, environmental sustainability help everyone sitting in any part of the world. Otherwise, why America would have been serious about saying in the Paris that don't do development? Because any loss, any ecological, environmental loss in any part of the world will cause a loss to the others too. So, because the environment serve all and economy, unfortunately the new development strategy, economic strategy, help a few only. So there is an issue which I think we all have gathered here. And I'm very grateful, UNT and others, that you have given a chance to all leaders. We should not merely be speaking on our development process and so on. We must also be serious about a constant discussion, regular events, regular and involving others who have not joined this campaign today for the future, which I believe, and it is only possible when we have been doing it constantly, we'll be doing it. We looked at if the solution is somewhere, because we feel that it is rural sustainability does mean urban too. It's not the rural will enjoy kind of a sustainability, they are already sustainable one way or other. But if we are very serious about for urban's future too, so we'll have to understand the rurals, acknowledge them, and also equal opportunity for rural in social, political, economical and environmental. Their acknowledgement is very important, and more important, I think the consumer must be a contributor. It has to come in a principle. Principle of nature says, whomsoever consuming more must be contributor. We must decide who consume more and what way they are contributing. That's one issue which is to be raised now. At least when the climate change, global warming and political leaders, Obama to Modi to this and that talking, and this is a climate change, and there are whole issue being raised in the United Nations. But the question is, we really should know, and it's a high time that we must say that consumer must be a contributor in a way one can. Primary producer must be a profit maker. Since, why urban enjoy more? Because they have the buying capacity and they are out of management. They are not producer. They are only simply producing, managing a resource, and they earn more. A producer, when become more profit maker, he will also enjoy everything which their counterparts in the urban are enjoying. So we must seriously think about and should make an issue that urban to rural priorities should be shifted. To my place, 70% public investment goes in the urban areas, 30% in the rural. It should be now 30% urban and 70% rural, and then only we can bring social, economical, and other kind of equity between the two. And as I say, there has to be a mechanism where rural people could feel proud of contributing in the growth of nation, which unfortunately never done. The rural people are identified merely underprivileged people, no amenities, the problem shooter. We have this identity, rural. But the fact is that if there is no rural, no urban. Every urban was rural once upon a time. There has been a transformation that became rural to urban. So to weigh out, my request is to all of the colleagues here, because we are opening a kind of discussion and dialogue. Must constantly work on that. And my request is that there must be a regular rural summit. Today it was in America, tomorrow it may happen in another place. There has to be one. And at least there are undoubtedly in urban areas people sitting who are very honestly want to contribute for rurals by any ways they can. So therefore, we really need to make one association of international for rural advocates, so that this body can connect rural, urban, politics, and economics and everything, the contribution of rural in the total development of the globe, the contribution. It may have its publication, it may have 2-3 years, the regular summits, one part here and another time, and should involve all those leaders who are working in very remote parts, so that ultimately the share of rural people, a justice can be done to them. Otherwise, friends, I come from a place where unfortunately insurgency, militancy, these are kind of things happening in the countryside. Do you think the rich man children, they never turn militants? The poorest people are become victim because the others buy them to do what happens when the insurgency or militancy happens. So what I'm trying to say, that we really need a dialogue, discussion internationally, keep on going, because why smart cities all time? We are talking after the urban, a new word has come here, smart city. My country also shouting every day, newspapers say smart city, Agra, smart city, Dehradun. But they never talk of smart villages, which can be a producer, a good manager too. Why should I not? Why can't I make a product out of my primary resource? Why the urban only? We do not deny. Urban can do a management and marketing, but the producer can also become a secondary producer of that product. But never technology, science and knowledge have been honestly we were equipped with. And that is the reason why we have. So my request is the only that today, you know what happened? In my state, as I said, 15 years statehood granted, it happened nothing. When we did a campaign, make it politicalized, socialized and everything. And we took a march in the whole state, and whole villages, they all came into this campaign. The political leaders second, chief minister chair was second, and he realized that, and every second day he began to declare one thing another for the villages. But I think that's not the answer. The answer lies, we really need to be very serious about, a system is to be created. Everybody has to be realized that urban's contribution is more than the rural contribution is more than the urban. The only matter is that we do not have any mechanism. We have never gathered together to acknowledge and to discuss about them, fight for them. We have never done it. I think it's something which UNT has done. I believe that unsustainability in rural regime will lead to global economic and environmental sustainability. This is my strong conviction. I've been working in villages. I know one after the others, villages are emptying, and rural resources are also turning. I mean, the barren lands are coming in rural part of many parts of the country, in my Himalayas also. Therefore, we really need to have a very serious issues, and this meeting, this workshop, is a responsibility of all participants who have come to take and decide the next step now onward. And I thank all of you. To listen me, I would have been a little harsh, but it's a truth that I have kept before you. The truth is that if there is no rural, won't be urban in future. Thank you very much.
We'll take some questions.
Question for you. In your presentation, you mentioned that urban and rural are two separate entities. My suggestion would be, can it not work together? Because if it is in the mind that they are two separate entities and there has to be a constant struggle between the two, I don't think they can be kind of like a holistic development. One should be supported.
That looks very romantic, but it doesn't happen. I'm to tell you, you see, I know it's a fact that all government, I mean, I'm talking of developing countries, underdeveloped countries, know the facts. But since they are sitting, most of the, as I said, governance power around the urbans only, the rurals do not in the mainstream. But the only thing is that there is a brotherhood between the two. I do not deny that. The primary needs are supplied by the rurals to the urbans. That's why I'm repeatedly saying it is urban's responsibility more now to look into the rural issues.
Yeah, so there can be like gardening or there can be some development brought in the villages. And it doesn't happen like right educational resources, involvement of women and other things which have been creating the barriers, and that's why many people would not, because development cannot be like one shot thing. It wouldn't just happen right away. It's not just money spending, because as you mentioned, it would be distributed and going to middleman anyways. So it would be important that in the rural areas, development starts in the form of education and health.
Sustainable.
Yeah.
Resource based.
Yeah, and if that doesn't happen, they will never be any kind of improvement, because people, you mentioned militancy, right? This is happening because the basic forms of education, how they have not been receiving those, and that's why we're trying to such needs.
Yeah, we have 6 minutes, so let's have everybody have a chance to ask questions.
The next person who asks a question, raise your hand so he can give you the microphone, actually,
Thanks, Keith.
because that way we can catch the question better. Who has a question?
Yes, remarkable.
Keith, moderate.
Oh, it's actually just to catch your sound on the video.
Speak up.
After staying in rural area for 35 years, as Joshi has done, in the last 5 years, I don't see much difference between rural India and urban India. The big problem for rural India is rural India itself. They are equally greedy. They also want to use a lot of resources. Now, to save this earth, to save agriculture, to save trees, to save our rivers, there is no any physical with urban mind. There are a lot of people in urban centers with rural mind. To say all this, the all rural minds in the world should unite. That's what I think.
Do you have a response to that?
I see what he has said is that I do not deny those around the cities rural are little urbanized. But truly speaking, the India, if he's taking an example of, it is a 650,000 villages. And from 650,000 villages, 600,000 villages are still far off many things which cannot be placed as little urbanized.
Is there someone else who has, we have time for one more comment. Judith?
I have a question.
Okay.
How do you see the major development agencies that are so actively involved in this GDP model and doing unsustainable development? How do you see the rurals being able to alter that mindset?
That's of course very difficult thing which we have been saying, but the only thing that we try to do, take an example of the state. We convince the state government that we disagree with this one and there will be ill political consequences for you if you will not agree with that. So what I'm trying to say is that unless until we make the issue which becomes little political, so that only go in the air of the politicians because they are unfortunately ultimate decision maker. That is the only way we can do. Otherwise, the development agencies will do what the government will decide. But the government is run by the politician. Politician must understand, and they will be loser if that threat can be given to them if they don't listen to the people. That's the only way which we find can be the one.
Actually, we have time for one more question because I looked at the clock. Ma'am, did you still have a question?
So now that there's globalization and everyone in the rural areas of India has an opportunity to see television and listen to radio, the media entices the young people to leave the rural areas with promises of gold and a good future. So what do you see can be done to encourage the generational ruralization so that it continues?
You see, the only thing is that if you see, very interestingly, I tell you some of the facts that many places there are many examples. People left the urban areas, went back to their villages, and did it because they were educated. They knew they had an exposure in Delhi and the towns. They knew that I can earn doing a service of low job in the cities. I can become a master of my own enterprise. And they left and they came back. There may be a few cases, but it has to be generalized. And thus, most important is that unless the major part of public investment, the infrastructure intact with the primary productivity should remain intact with the community, plus what we can best help local community for the marketing skill, intelligence, local opportunities that can only help to check, which unfortunately is not helping. And that's the reason the issues is being raised.
All right, let's thank Dr. Joshi.